Before the start of the show today, I get a call from someone who says, "Hey, I'm here with Senator Jim DeMint. Can we come on the show?" Sure. Go ahead, call in. No, he's in town. We want to stop by. Oh, okay. What's going on? Senator, welcome to the show.
Well, Nate, thank you. It's, I think, my first time in Boise, and it's great weather. I left Washington this morning, hot, humid.
Oh,
it
no.
just feels wonderful here.
It's wonderful here. And before we get you all the brochures and tell you where all the wonderful restaurants are, to what do we owe the honor?
I am here trying to save the country after working in Washington 20 years, just trying to roll back spending and stop all the debt creation and the infringement on every area of our lives. It's not going to happen in Washington. And so I've been working with former Senator Tom Coburn and a great group of people around the country on the Article 5 Convention of the States idea. And the whole idea there, Nate, is to get the states to come together to call for a convention to restore the original limits on the Constitution. Our founders envisioned this time when the federal government would get out of control, so they wrote into Article 5 a provision that states can call a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. So that's what I'm here, is just to plead with your legislature to help us save our country.
Well, and this isn't. You were in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been out for a bit, but you were in the U.S. Senate, and forgive me, you resigned.
I resigned. I went to the Heritage Foundation thinking we could do more from the outside. I still believe that. But I served 6 years in the House. I term limited myself, and I term limited myself in the Senate as well. But I can tell you now, it's structurally impossible in Washington for us to ever balance the budget, which means sooner or later we're going to bankrupt the country. And there are folks who really want that, because that kind of crisis, just like in 2008, allows the federal government to take even more power, just as they did in the banking industry. But we need to do what our founders intended us to do. We, the people working through the states, is to rein in the power of the federal government. And there's only one way to do that peacefully and constitutionally, and that's to use an Article 5 Amendments Convention.
All right. Now, former Senator Jim DeMint joining us in studio, and this is happening. I have it in front of me right now. This is happening tonight at the Yeardley Senior Center. That's over by the VA and over by the Little Theater. That's beginning around 6:30. It's going to go on from 7 to 9 tonight. All right. You're gonna do a presentation.
We'll be answering questions.
Okay.
I'm here to encourage the ground troops, and they're encouraging me. I'm working in a number of states, and the whole idea is just to get grassroots voting Americans to get engaged with their legislature, to push them to help us save our country. And, Nate, I know normally state legislators don't think of themselves as being responsible for the federal government, but the states form the federal government, and it is their responsibility to keep it from bankrupting our nation.
I've heard of the term constitutional convention before, CON. I've heard this term before. You're talking about a convention of the states. Forgive me, for everybody else out there who may have heard the same thing. What's the difference? There's
a big difference in perception. For years, I'd heard about never have a constitutional convention because it's going to get out of control. They're going to do all kind of crazy things. The fact is that couldn't happen. Under Article 5, states propose a convention with specific subject matter or amendments, and that's what the convention is for. But then 38 states have to ratify it. So the convention is just about suggestions. 38 states are not going to ratify some crazy amendment that takes away our right. The point is not to pass anything in a convention that tells people or states how to live their lives. The whole point of the convention is to determine where those decisions are made. Are they going to be made in Washington? Is Washington going to tell you where your kids go to school, what kind of health care you're going to get, what roads you build in your state? Or are we going to do it like the Constitution intended? If it's not specific in the Constitution that the federal government's going to do it, the state's supposed to be doing it. The only way to restore that after all the court interpretations is for the states to come together and propose what I call clarifying amendments that say we were serious when we said the 10th Amendment. The Commerce Clause is not about the federal government running our schools or our hospitals. It's about regulating trade between the states. That's the way it was intended.
Former Senator Jim DeMint joining us in studio. If you have a question for him regarding this Convention of States, Article 5 Convention. Article 5 Convention of States. 208-336-3700. Pound 670 on your Verizon wireless phone. I'm going to fire a couple things at you right now, though. Let's go with the Affordable Health Care Act, and which looks like with a Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican president will probably be the rule of law until somebody changes it. It's just not going to happen anytime soon. I can't explain why. Maybe you could. Would this Convention of States do away with that?
It's basically part of it because the federal government is not supposed to be running our health care system. The 10th Amendment would have made it clear they're not running. They should not be running our health care system or our schools. So a convention could propose amendments to restore the power of the states to regulate their own education systems, their own health care system. It would give the states the power to work with each other, but it could take the federal government out of the education. But again, it's just proposing amendments. And of course, I'm very disappointed after hearing Republicans campaign for the last 7 or 8 years that they're going to repeal it, that they weren't ready to do it on day one. And it's really because a lot of the special interests in Washington, the insurance companies, the big corporations, the big pharmaceutical companies, the big hospital chains, they want national health care because that's how they can control it.
Once again, tonight, 7 o'clock, the Yearly Senior Center. Former Senator Jim DeMint will be there making a presentation on what the Convention of States is. Welcome the call, 208-336-3700. Pound 670 on your Verizon wireless phone, 1-800-529-KBOI. People have questions as to what this means. Looks from what you tell me that it's just going to be suggestions. It's just going to be a few suggestions to get the ball rolling as the debates have been ongoing. So far, the only thing that Congress has been able to do is name Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Outside of that, I can't really think of too many other victories. But, Senator, while you're on with us here, taking a few calls.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and talk to Greg in Boise. Greg, you're on 670 KBOI with Senator Jim DeMint. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. DeMint. You stated just moments ago that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is not something that is covered or allowed for under the Commerce Clause. So my question to you is, what would you say about Social Security?
Senator?
Well, Social Security is a federal program, and I think it's outside the bounds of the original intent of the Constitution. What we need to do in a situation like that, where you've got people who've paid into it for 40 or 50 years, is begin to give people some options. And I think it's the kind of things that states could do. We certainly don't need to throw Social Security and Medicare out because people have paid so much into it. But the best way to do is begin to transition away from federal control of your retirement programs and give states the ability to create some alternative or give people the ability to control their own retirement plans. So nothing like that could be uprooted immediately because it wouldn't be fair to the people who had invested in it.
Greg, appreciate the question. What is on the docket as far as you're going to go there with a specific agenda? You want to have this Convention of States with a specific agenda. What exactly do you have in mind? Great
question, Nate, because the resolutions we're encouraging have 3 subject matter areas, and all of them limit the power of the federal government. One is to propose amendments to restrain the federal government in fiscal areas, such as balancing the budget, limiting spending, limiting taxes. The second subject matter area is to limit the authority and jurisdiction of the federal government over the states and the people. So it's limiting power, unfunded mandates, limiting their power over education or health care. The third is to propose amendments that would limit the terms of federal officials, including bureaucrats, judges, congressmen, and senators. So, again, the convention could propose limits, and then the people would have to decide. But, for instance, term limits is supported by about 80% of Americans for congressmen and senators. And frankly, I think it could be one of the best reforms that we could have.
You chose to term limit yourself.
Right.
You chose to step away out of that wonderful city that is Washington, D.C. Others keep being reelected, and their terms come up. Would you have been reelected if you had made the decision to run again? And honestly, as good as you can guesstimate.
Well, yeah, clearly I had a pretty safe district for a conservative Republican when I was in the House, and the state was very favorable to the things I was doing. So I think I could have stayed in Washington as long as Strom Thurmond or Fritz Hollins if I'd wanted to, the folks who came before me. But I never run for public office till I was 47 years old. I did not want to become what I saw was up there. And frankly, there are very few people who've been there over 10 years who are really fighting to shake things up.
Really?
And that doesn't mean there are a lot of good people there. But the system beats you down after a while, and sooner or later you have to go along or you have to fight the system. And if you fight the system, they're going to make you out to be somebody like a Mike Lee or a Ted Cruz. They're going to treat you like you're crazy.
Once again, tonight, 7 o'clock from 7 to 9. This is happening at the Dick Yeardley Senior Center. That's 690 Robbins Road. It starts at 7, goes until 9 o'clock tonight. This is the presentation for a convention of states. It's Article 5 convention of states. And one day I will fully understand what the difference between that and a constitutional convention is, because you guys both want to propose changes.
Yeah. And we just don't want to rewrite the Constitution. And I think the perception is if you say we want a constitutional convention, that was what we did in the beginning when we wrote our Constitution. We don't need to rewrite the Constitution. We just need to reinforce its original meaning. And that's what we have to do through the amendment process, because court cases and precedents over the years, executive orders, everything have basically blown the Constitution out of the water. There are no limits anymore in Washington about what they could do.
I have a lot of questions for you, but so does the audience. 208-336-3700. Let's go to Terry in Cuna. Terry, you're on 670 KBOI. Go ahead, Terry.
Hey, good afternoon, Senator. I'm wondering if this would go in also the direction of straightening out the VA, particularly the medical side of it.
Well, the VA is a federal institution. Whether or not it was originally intended in the Constitution, I think it's there, and that's going to be a federal function. I don't think the Convention of the States is going to be involved with veteran affairs unless the states were to propose something that would get the states, put the states in ability to offer more alternative to veterans. And I've always wanted the veterans to be able to choose not only veterans hospitals, but to have free access to all the other hospitals as well. So there's probably some things that could be done, but it's not specifically in the subject matter that we're proposing for the first convention.
208-336-3700. Terry, appreciate the call. Let's go to Jeff in Meridian. Jeff, you're on 670 KBOI with Jim DeMint. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Nate. Thanks for taking my call. Senator DeMint, I just wanted to know your opinion on what Newt Gingrich said recently. He said it's really not the House that's at fault for not getting the Trump agenda rolling. He said that the House has passed 400 bills, and they're all being stalled in the Senate. And then this week, Senator Corker basically said, that not passing the Trump agenda. So I think the problem really is in the Senate. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I mean, the House even passed some version of Obamacare repeal, and they couldn't get it through the Senate. And the Senate's pretty much just working a couple of days a week right now. They're on a week-long vacation. And with all the things that need to be done and the trouble in our country, if they want to get the judges confirmed, the nominees confirmed, a lot of folks don't understand that Trump is not even staffed in his administration yet, much below the secretary level. And a lot of the Obama hangovers are still there running things. It's what makes it hard for Jeff Sessions. So, yeah, I think the biggest problem is the Senate right now, and the problem there is that you've got a lot of folks that say they are Republicans who just don't believe in the Republican principles of decentralized power and limited government.
I asked this to a former senator yesterday, so I'll ask it to you. You miss it?
Not a bit.
I mean, can I say what you said off air about the news?
Sure.
You don't watch the news that much anymore?
Well, I can't find a station that knows what's going on, and I still work in Washington. I'm trying to help conservatives be more effective And I just came from Washington this morning. We met with members of the Freedom Caucus yesterday. But I can't turn on a TV or even Fox and see something that resembles what's actually going on, or someone who actually understands all the shenanigans that go on behind the scenes. They're using parliamentary procedures to say they voted against the Iran deal, for instance, when in fact the Republicans set it up to pass it. And I just think what the news focuses on is not the news as far as what's important to our country.
208-336-3700. Pro-Life, you're on 670 KBOI. Go ahead, Pro-Life. You're on with Jim DeMint.
Yeah, Mr. DeMint, the real problem is the three branches of government are not staying within their jurisdiction. Congress doesn't want to rule on a lot of things, so they let the courts make law, supposedly, which isn't really constitutional, and they let the executive department make regulations and law through executive orders. And I'm saying that maybe the first thing you would want to do is really take that into the first order of business.
Maybe Pro-Life will come tonight for the presentation. But
well, I hope so. And I think one of the things, Roe v. Wade, for instance, took the authority of the states who were limiting abortion away from states, and made it a federal, basic right. Convention of the States could limit the jurisdiction of the federal government in that respect as well. So there's a lot we could accomplish if we start understanding that our founders and our Constitution intended for the states to play a more active role in keeping the federal government accountable. Over the years, the federal government has basically bribed and extorted states to give up more and more power in order to get money. And now that money's drying up, and some of the states are suing the federal government, whether it be for amnesty or for health care mandates. More and more states are implementing various kinds of education choices. It's just time the states just step up. It's the only way we're going to stop the federal government from completely bankrupting our country.
But the states have to agree to that.
The states have to agree to it, yeah.
Former Senator Jim DeMint in town tonight. You can see him. You can hear the whole presentation tonight at 7 o'clock at the Yeardley Senior Center. That's 690 Robbins Road, downtown Boise, right by the Little Theater, right by the VA. Senator, I appreciate the time. Thanks,
you. Nate. It's been great to be with you.
Sign the petition at cosaction.com and get as many of your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.